arrangement, start writing the statement numbers in. One of his daughters is with us. One left. He was a physicist psychologist. She said she's coming back, right? He was a physicist psychologist, right? So, as I always like to say, remember he had a PhD in psychology, right? But he also had a PhD in physics, right? And yes, first. And he was interested in studying psychophysics, which is how we ended up, right? Because people would be like, why in God's name would anybody get a PhD in physics and then get a PhD in psychology? Right? That was why. We ended up studying with Spearman, who's the founder of factor analysis. Again, not something with Spearman. Just correlation. Right? Study of behavior like in 1955, right? And 1935 is the date, is the year of his letter to Nature. It's most typically used in fields of psychology and marketing and advertising and political science. Just, right, the other day I was talking about why I think this is the most fun conference. So usually I go to conferences and they're either physicists or education people. And not that there's anything wrong with either of those. But this is a fun conference because everybody's kind of all over the place, and what's in common is the methodology, which is very different from what I'm used to. But it does make it very fun. And, right, although some would disagree with me, I always say it's a mixed method where we have quantitative and qualitative, right? And it's really a continuum, right? We can't just, right, it all kind of into a loop. So we're going to bring up our picture, and we say, okay, what do you see? Is it a duck, a bunny, neither, or both? Again, yes. What did you see first? And then you can always, so you say B, you decide you want to say A. Just click A, and it'll erase your original answer, and it'll be good. Wow, we're a duck crew. It's funny because usually it's kind of split. I think it's funny because when I look at it, every time I know it's a duck or a bunny, or as I like to say, it's a dunny. Right? But every time I look at it, the first one I see is so, but there's no right or wrong answer. Some people might see a duck, some people might see a bunny, right? It's the same idea as the sorting process, right? I might view the statements one way. I see the statements like a duck. John sees the statements like a bunny. Right? It doesn't mean that one of us is right and one of us is wrong. It just means that we have a different perspective when we look at this. We see something slightly different. All right. So we're going to go back to thinking about concourse again. Following are appropriate sources for a few books, focus groups, interviews, or all of these. Now we're just making sure you were paying attention at the beginning and you haven't. I feel pretty confident. It's not like when I teach class during spring semester and my students leave and go on spring break. There's always a lot of purging of physics information during that time. Yay, all of these. Yep, so we can use any kind of resources to make up the Q concourse. Remember, the concourse, right, is all of the items. So I know I mentioned this before, but I believe in that whole circular kind of thing where, right, we kind of touched on everything, and now we're just coming back around and we're going a little deeper in detail. So you have your concourse, right? You talk to 100 people in focus group reflection, right? And now you have all full say statements. Right? We look for themes. So when you look through these statements, do they seem to group into some kind of natural category? Right? Are there statements that are similar? So one person might say, we'll go back to the ducks, right? I hate ducks, and somebody else says I love ducks, right? You don't need to have a statement that says I hate ducks and one that says I love ducks. Too similar. but we can sort on this continuum. So if one, right, most unlike my view is I love ducks, right? They might, or maybe you feel like I hate ducks is something very different than most unlike as I love ducks. And so we can include. So those are the decisions that we make as we go through our statements, right? Sometimes I end up combining ideas, right? Because I really, two statements together, right, might make more sense, or just changing some of the way an idea is expressed. I try to write things pretty much on a fourth, fifth grade level, right? And I'm very conscious of, right, using words that everybody understands, but in there kind of window. Right? And then I select a balanced Q sample. It doesn't mean that I'm going to pick 15 statements from each of my, like, 3 categories. Right? It means that I'm going to look at that I have enough statements for each of my themes to communicate those ideas. Okay? The number of statements to sort is actually the sample size, and you try to get a Q sample. A Q study published, that is often a big bugaboo by editors, because they see that you had people sort, and they just kind of flip out. So I usually make sure I state in manuscripts that are in fact the sample size, so that we have to, the idea is we have to represent the communication about the topic, right? Not that we have to have an order, right? Because that's our methodology, I do linear regression studies, you have to have so many people, depending on how many items you have in your regression formula, and, it's different. From around 1980, because I know this comes through the Q list a lot, most Q samples contain 40 to 50 items. It's page 200. It's one of those, remember it, put it in your paper kind of things. Right? Then we need to create, we have information about how many items selected our Q sample. Right? As a rule, so I have quoted him again, still page 200, it's a great page. Right? Smaller than n equals 40 can safely utilize a range of +4 to -4. These are not cut in stone data. Right? This is just generality. From 3 to 60, a range of +5 to -5 is generally obtained. 40 to 50 items and employ a range of +5 to -5 with a quasi-normal flattened distribution. Right? So this is just another example of, right, a Q. In this particular study, I had 59 items. I make my Q grids. I do everything in Excel. I like Excel, and frankly, it's really easy to make your grids, right? To have Q samples so that you can print it out. Yes. Oh, sorry. Oh, that's my empty grid. Right. So I use everything. I can make it print out on, right, 2 pages or 1 page when I print out my samples, so that they're with a cutter and I slice them up. But at work, apparently need the paper cutter out for sharpening, so I was having problems. So that's how we ended up slicing and dicing a little bit. So and I just keep everything in here. If you want a copy of a blank one of these, I can send it to you. Just email me. I'll have my email address at the very end, and I'm more than happy to send out my blank one. I even have, like, instructions, because, of my background, that, I feel like I have to have instructions on how to make the grid and all of those things. So I made this in Excel, and then I colored it light green, because there are people that we would like to make it a color. Do you have any problem with that? No. Yeah. Oh, I know. All right, so gone through that, right? Could you sort the following statement, or in this case, based on your views of research and learning, and right, meaning is determined by the sorter, not the researcher. So I know for my definitions about a variety of different things, right? Sorter determines what exactly that statement means to them. Yes. You know from our class, she did it multiple. They ended up changing the statements to that. But what she was interested in was her clients who have Alzheimer's in early, and then how they thought others viewed their memory. So they would take those items, sort it about how they viewed their memory, and then maybe how their spouse viewed their memory. No, you can just have it do instructors sort based. Students did their view of their epistemology views, and then the instructors each sorted once for how they thought their typical student would sort, and then how they thought their ideal student would sort. And it was very interesting. Ideal and typical were very, very similar, and others were very, very different. I was very enlightening and helped them see some things in their class. Validity's not a consideration. I always say you got to be careful about statements. This is always a good one, right? One of the statements that we don't use in the epistemology study anymore. I worked hard in this class. I worked hard in this class could mean something very different to me than it does to Jack, right? Tell me in physics classes that they worked very hard. They did the homework. They studied 2 hours a night. You know, they went to students who tell me they worked really hard. They spent an hour studying physics. You know, right? Worked hard, and so that would be an example of people taking a statement and seeing it very different. And I probably would not say they worked hard. The following is the most appropriate software for performing the analyses from a Q methodology study. Right, so I have all my Q sorts, so now what do I do? What software would I use? Would I use SPSS, Microsoft Excel, SAS, EQ method? Now minds are getting tired. Need to sort, need to listen, need to click. Yay! Right? So I have some interesting conversations sometimes with people. From my university who insists that she could do it all in SPSS, right? And she can do the factor analysis in SPSS. God bless her, right? I don't want to do all that stuff in SPSS or Excel, right? I just don't want to because PQ method is free, and as I tell my students, free, it's my favorite F word and one of my favorite 4-letter words. We like free, and it gives you that printout, and that's the part that you can't get from software that can do the factor analysis for you, but it can't provide all of those rich details that are so meaningful for us, right, as Q methodologists. So it's a free download. We can go to qmethod.org. Oh, because I'm not on the internet. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Like this. There we go. Okay. When you download it now, it comes with DOSBox, right? And that's because, you know, modern computers really don't like DOS so much anymore, and so we have to run DOSBox. It's like factor analysis. It's not scary. It's not scary, right? Like Centroid, right? We can do hand rotation. So, say I have done the magic and I have downloaded the software, and so in my C drive, which is where most people's, at least PCs, want to plant things, I have a folder called DOSBox for Windows. It downloaded when I downloaded PQ Method. And if I go to DOSBox, the one with the pretty picture next to it, and I click on it, it brings up this window that those of us who are a little older recognize as, and we don't think it's scary, right? When I downloaded this, which is a little while ago, it is one of the newer ones, but I think Peter Schmaltz updated again. When I did it, it came up and it was just in the C drive. So, because I'm special in that way, I went into the files that lays all of this stuff out. It's just dumb. And all I did was add CD /PQ method, CD change directory. Not CD. PQ method. So then I can, at this prompt, right, it's just the